The Hale Group's boardroom occupied the entire 79th floor, glass walls offering Chicago's skyline as backdrop to 16 faces arranged around a table that cost more than most homes. March 1st, 9 a.m. Victoria Hale advanced through her quarterly presentation, numbers climbing across the screen behind her. International expansion ahead of schedule, revenue exceeding forecasts by 11.3%. Marcus Whitfield didn't wait for her to finish the slide. We're avoiding the obvious issue. Your connection to that building maintenance worker has become a shareholder concern. 2.1% stock decline yesterday alone. Victoria's hands stilled on the presentation remote, her voice dropping to controlled precision. Is our client base questioning our business execution, Marcus, or consuming gossip media? Patricia Chen adjusted her glasses 3 seats away, diplomatic tone masking the alliance forming against Victoria. When a CEO's private affairs create measurable market impact, fiduciary duty requires board intervention. The silence that followed pressed against windows streaked with fresh snow. Richard Hale sat at the far end, silver-haired and motionless. A man who'd built empires by reading rooms better than most people read books. When he finally moved, it was to stand with deliberate calm. Victoria, I need the room. Wait outside, please. The door sealed behind her with pneumatic finality. Richard buttoned his suit jacket. 71 years of authority condensed into the gesture. Before this board makes demands, there's context you lack about Ethan Brooks. Information I should have provided 6 weeks ago. He reached for the presentation remote, and the screen went dark. 6 weeks earlier, January 14th. Wheels on the cleaning cart created a rhythm Ethan Brooks could navigate by muscle memory alone. 3 years of night shifts reduced to sound and motion. The 78th floor stretched before him, offices dark, conference rooms holding only the ghost of daytime urgency. Badge number 4721 swung from his lanyard, the photo 3 years old, taken his first week when he'd still believed janitorial work was temporary. Snow battered the windows hard enough to rattle glass. Chicago's weather service had escalated to blizzard conditions an hour back. Wind chill warnings predicting minus 15 degrees by midnight. Ethan's phone showed 11:47 p.m. South Wing completed early, 23 minutes ahead of the schedule he'd internalized like breathing. Mrs. Chen's text arrived as he reached for the thermos she'd filled before his shift. Lily sleeping. Storm bad. Be safe coming home. 3 years of unspoken arrangement lived in those 9 words. The 70-year-old Vietnamese woman next door, who watched his daughter without ever making him feel like charity, who understood what it meant to raise a child alone in a country that measured worth in dollars and dismissed the rest as failure. On my way soon. Thank you. The memory surfaced unbidden. 3 mornings ago, sunshine cutting through kitchen windows that desperately needed cleaning. Lily had looked up from her cereal bowl, gap between her front teeth visible when she smiled. 7 years old, and convinced her father held answers to every question the universe posed. Miss Chen says the storm might bury the whole street. Ethan had been assembling her school lunch with practiced efficiency. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices in the container with a broken latch, juice box. His wallet lay open beside the cutting board, 2 singles and loose change visible. The envelope marked rent, $800 due February 1st, anchored other bills he'd been strategically ignoring. On the refrigerator, a crayon drawing showed 3 figures. The rightmost one wore wings sketched in silver marker, hovering above the other 2. Sarah Brooks, dead 14 months from a car accident that had been instantaneous for her, endless for everyone else. And the medical debt from her final hospitalization still carved numbers from his paycheck each month. "We'll build the biggest fort on the block if the snow comes," Ethan had promised. Mrs. Chen had arrived through the back gate as he'd gathered keys, moving with the certainty of someone who'd survived worse than weather. "Your wife would be proud of the father you've become." The words had settled into his chest alongside grief that never quite finished its work. Now, on the 78th floor, Ethan pushed his cart toward the executive elevator bank. 3 years had taught him the art of existing without being perceived, furniture with a pulse, necessary but invisible. Invisible meant safety, meant steady employment and health insurance that kept Lily's checkups covered and bills that, while late, eventually got paid. And the woman on the floor stopped him mid-step. She'd collapsed near the elevator call buttons, designer dress soaked with snowmelt, one Louboutin shoe separated from her foot by 3 feet of marble, blonde hair spread across tile that probably cost his monthly rent per square yard. Even from distance, Ethan could see violent shivering. The face registered a beat later. Employee bulletin boards rotated executive photographs monthly, corporate attempt at humanizing the people whose decisions trickled down to everyone else. Victoria Hale, CEO, the daughter of the man whose name hung on the building itself. Every instinct screamed retreat. Call security from the service phone. File appropriate incident reports. It let someone whose job description included executive emergencies handle whatever catastrophe had left a billionaire unconscious on her own floor. She made a sound then, small, wounded, entirely human, and tried to push herself upright. Her arms buckled. Ethan thought about the conversation he'd had with Lily after she'd helped Mr. Patterson when ice had sent the elderly neighbor sprawling. The talk about how helping people mattered regardless of convenience or fear. How character showed in moments when no one was watching and there was nothing to gain. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Victoria's eyes opened but couldn't find focus. Fever radiated from her skin when Ethan checked her pulse. Too rapid, too thready, the kind of heat that meant infection burning unchecked. "I need meeting. The board won't." "You need medical attention. I'm calling security and getting you help." Panic cut through fever haze with startling clarity. Her hand shot out, fingers locking around his wrist. "No, no security. My father. He can't. Please don't call anyone." The terror in those words carried weight that had nothing to do with delirium. Ethan recognized it from hospital rooms when Sarah's breathing had turned labored, when doctors had used phrases like managing expectations and comfort measures. The fear of losing control, of vulnerability becoming public record. Outside, wind drove snow against windows with enough force to create visible vibration, temperature plummeting toward genuinely dangerous territory. Security would circuit this floor in approximately 20 minutes. He'd learned their patterns years ago, timing his work around their scheduled rounds. 2 paths diverged. Make the safe choice. Call for help. Document everything. Protect himself from liability and questions. Or make a different choice entirely. Sarah's face surfaced in memory. The expression she'd worn when he'd suggested skipping the fundraiser for the women's shelter because they couldn't afford the admission. The gentle disappointment that had taught him more about character than any sermon. "I'm getting you somewhere safe, but you have to stay conscious. Can you do that?" Victoria's nod barely qualified as movement. 3 years of night shifts had mapped the building's blind spots with precision. Security cameras with predictable gaps. Service elevator that descended directly to parking without passing guard stations. Ethan wrapped his work jacket around her trembling frame. Chicago winter in shirt sleeves. But necessity overruled comfort and got her upright on the 3rd attempt. The service elevator's descent felt eternal. 78, 61, 47. Each floor a decision point where he could still abort, call for proper help, return to invisible safety. By the parking garage level, his heart hammered hard enough to interfere with breathing. The 2009 Honda Civic sat in the employee section, odometer reading 187,000 miles. Windshield crack he'd been meaning to repair since October. He settled Victoria in the passenger seat, cranked heat to maximum despite knowing the engine would protest, and spent precious seconds clearing snow from glass, with hands going numb. At the garage exit, he paused. The automated gate lifted, revealing streets already buried under accumulation. Hour crossed that threshold, and there was no reversing course. No explanation that wouldn't sound like exactly the liability nightmare it represented. Victoria stirred, fever giving way to brief lucidity. Where I have to get to the shareholders. The only thing that matters right now is getting you warm and safe. The gate's metal arm hung suspended, waiting for commitment. Ethan pressed the accelerator and drove into weather that had shut down most of Chicago. Highway 88 West was abandoned except for emergency vehicles, salt trucks fighting a losing battle against snowfall that exceeded forecasts. Ethan maintained 30 miles per hour, tracking lane markers by memory when visibility dropped to car-length distances. Radio cycled through warnings. Avoid all travel. Temperatures life-threatening. Or shelter in place unless emergency requires movement. His phone lit up repeatedly. Mrs. Chen calling, worried. He texted one-handed while keeping eyes fixed forward. Work emergency. Home by 4 a.m. Victoria drifted between consciousness and fever dreams, murmuring about acquisitions and quarterly targets and someone named Marcus who threatened everything. Ethan provided generic reassurance when she seemed to need it, focused primarily on keeping the car from sliding into guardrails he could barely see. "Who are you?" The question emerged during a clearer moment, her head turning with visible effort. "Someone who's going to help you. What's your name?" "Victoria Hale. I can't miss. They're waiting for..." "Nothing's more important than getting you somewhere safe right now." The Aurora exit materialized through snow like revelation. Ethan took it carefully, feeling tires hunt for traction on ice lurking beneath powder. Suburban streets were worse, unplowed, unmarked except for occasional mailboxes creating navigation points. He counted houses by memory, 4 down on the left. Blue siding disappeared under snow. Porch light burning. Mrs. Chen's doing, knowing he'd need the beacon. Victoria's eyes widened as the modest house came into view, confusion momentarily overpowering illness. This isn't, where are we? The safest place I know. Mrs. Chen opened the door before they reached the steps, backlit by warm interior light, taking in the scene with the composure of someone who'd navigated harder situations than unconscious billionaires. No questions, no hesitation. She simply widened the opening and disappeared toward the linen closet. Together they settled Victoria on the second-hand sofa, the one Ethan had bought 3 years prior when starting over meant furnishing an empty house on maintenance wages. Mrs. Chen returned with blankets, heavy ones reserved for coldest nights, and they layered them over shivering that wouldn't stop. Mrs. Chen's whisper carried decades of wisdom. "Should I call a doctor?" She specifically asked me not to. I think rest is what she needs right now. If she's not better by morning, I'll insist on medical care regardless. The older woman studied him with eyes that had witnessed too much to accept easy deception. "You understand who this is?" "I do." "You understand the complications this could create?" "I do." The pause stretched long enough for the furnace to cycle on, warm air pushing through vents with familiar rattle. Your Sarah would have made the same choice. She never walked past anyone who needed help, regardless of risk. Ethan's throat constricted. 14 months, and certain words still carried the power to break him. Lily's asleep upstairs. She doesn't know anything changed tonight. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for everything. You manage everything thrown at you, always have. She squeezed his arm with surprising strength. But be careful, Ethan. People with money that brings problems, regular folks can't imagine. After she left through the connecting gate, Ethan settled into the armchair across from the sofa. Living room small enough that wealth made it claustrophobic. Lily's toys overflowing the basket by the television, library books stacked on the coffee table alongside overdue notices. The puzzle pieces scattered across floor depicting solar system his daughter was currently obsessed with. He didn't sleep. Kept watch through hours that bled toward dawn, monitoring Victoria's breathing every 20 minutes, repositioning blankets when restless movement displaced them, pressing cool cloths against her forehead when fever spiked near 4 a.m. The absurdity crystallized somewhere around 5 a.m. as snow began easing and first gray light touched the yard. A janitor earning $2,340 monthly had just brought a billionaire to his home without authorization, without witnesses, without any explanation that wouldn't sound like kidnapping or worse. Victoria Hale inhabited a universe of boardrooms and international deals and private elevators that required security clearance to access. Their worlds shouldn't intersect, let alone collide like this. But around that same 5 a.m., watching dawn creep across snow-buried landscape, Ethan understood something that settled like truth. For all her wealth and power, Victoria had been completely alone on that hallway floor. No security monitoring her well-being, no assistant rushing to provide help, no friends on emergency contact lists, just expensive clothing and fever that didn't recognize net worth as relevant. Alone the way he'd been alone when Sarah died. When medical debt outpaced income. When he'd had to become both parents to a daughter who asked questions about heaven that no one could answer satisfactorily. Maybe that's what had driven his choice. Not who Victoria was, but what she'd been in that moment. Another human being who needed help and had no one else. Upstairs, a door creaked. With small footsteps descended stairs with rhythm Ethan would recognize anywhere. Lily appeared in the doorway at 6:14 a.m., rubbing sleep from her eyes, pajamas decorated with cartoon stars. "Daddy, you're home early." "Storm made me come back, baby girl. Come here." She crossed the carpet and climbed into his lap without hesitation, all warm weight and strawberry shampoo from last night's bath. Too big for this, growing faster than he could process. But he held her anyway and breathed in the particular scent of his daughter, safe and present. Lily's gaze found the sleeping woman on their couch, curiosity replacing sleepiness. "Who's that lady?" Ethan met his daughter's curious gaze, choosing honesty over evasion the way Sarah had taught him. "Someone who needed help, baby girl, like when you helped Mr. Patterson after he fell on the ice." Lily considered this with the gravity 7-year-olds brought to moral questions, then nodded acceptance. "Can I have cereal?" "Let's be quiet. She's still sleeping." They moved to the kitchen, Lily's footsteps careful on hardwood. Ethan poured Cheerios while coffee brewed, the ordinary rhythms of morning creating normalcy around extraordinary circumstances. Through the doorway, Victoria remained motionless under blankets, fever finally breaking based on the way her breathing had steadied. At 8:42 a.m., footsteps on carpet announced consciousness. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrinkled designer dress and bare feet, hair tangled from restless sleep. Eye confusion crossed her features as she took in the cramped space, nothing like the penthouse apartment or executive suite that shaped her normal life. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" "Better." Her voice came rough from fever and dehydration. "I don't know how to apologize for—" "You needed help. That's not something requiring apology." Ethan gestured toward the table where Lily sat coloring in a workbook, tongue visible between teeth in concentration. "Please, sit. You should eat something." Victoria lowered herself into the chair across from Lily, movements still unsteady. The girl looked up, gap-toothed smile immediate and unguarded. "Are you feeling better? Daddy said you were really sick." "Much better, thank you." "I'm Lily. I'm 7 3/4. Do you like pancakes?" "I do, actually." "Good. I know because Daddy makes the best ones. He uses vanilla extract. That's the secret ingredient." Ethan mixed batter while listening to Lily explain her current science fair project involving plant growth and different types of soil. Victoria engaged with genuine interest rather than adult condescension, asking questions that made Lily's answers grow more elaborate. The ease of it surprised him. Billionaire CEO fitting into his kitchen like she belonged, laughing at his daughter's theories about whether talking to plants actually helped them grow. The pancakes came out fluffy, butter melting into golden surfaces. Ethan served them with the maple syrup Lily considered non-negotiable. Coffee for Victoria that she accepted with gratitude bordering on reverence. This is perfect. For perhaps the first time in years, she was eating food someone had prepared simply to nourish, with no agenda beyond basic human care. No networking opportunities attached, no business discussions camouflaged as meals. They ate together while Lily narrated her week, Mrs. Rodriguez reading Charlotte's Web, the snow fort plan she'd been designing, whether hermit crabs counted as pets for show and tell purposes. Ethan watched Victoria watch his daughter, something shifting in her expression that suggested recognition of what she'd been missing. After breakfast, Ethan drove her back to the city in improving weather, roads passable now that plows had made their rounds. Victoria was quiet most of the drive, occasionally glancing at him as though trying to reconcile the man beside her with the world she inhabited. At her building, she turned before exiting. "Oh, I need to find a way to thank you properly." "You just did, by having breakfast with my daughter and treating her like she mattered." Victoria's eyes glistened, but she nodded and disappeared into her building's lobby. Ethan drove back to Aurora thinking that would be the end of it, a strange night, a good deed, a return to separate universes. He was wrong. January 17th. 2 days later, Richard Hale's study smelled of leather and old money, fireplace burning low, while Chicago's afternoon light filtered through windows overlooking 20 acres of snow-covered estate. The phone call from building security had come an hour ago, prefaced with hesitation that immediately signaled something irregular. "Sir, we found an anomaly in Ms. Hale's access records from the 14th. On the night of the blizzard." Richard had set down the quarterly report he'd been reviewing, attention sharpening. "Explain." "She exited via service elevator at 12:17 a.m. Employee badge 4721 was used to access it. Parking garage footage shows her being assisted to a vehicle by the badge holder. Name: Ethan Brooks, night maintenance, 3 years employed, level 2 clearance, clean record. He drove her off premises. She returned the following morning at 11:34 a.m. via the same vehicle." The pause that followed carried weight. Richard's daughter had been missing for 11 hours, aided by someone he'd never heard of, and he'd known nothing. "Send me everything. Employment file, background, financials, and Marcus, discreetly." Now the file spread across his desk told a story Richard recognized from a different era. Ethan Marcus Brooks, 34, widower, single father. The salary, $28,080 annually, wouldn't cover rent and childcare in most Chicago suburbs. Yet somehow this man was managing. Credit score destroyed by medical debt from his wife's final hospitalization. No criminal record. Performance reviews consistently above standard. Richard pulled up the parking garage footage, watched Ethan carry his daughter to the elevator with movement suggesting care rather than opportunity. Freeze-framed on the man's face. Studied it. Someone had his daughter for 11 hours. Made decisions about her welfare. Brought her to an unknown location. And Richard, with all his resources, all his carefully constructed security protocols, had been completely unaware. Unacceptable. He reached for his phone, dialed the board member who handled sensitive inquiries. To Patricia, I need information on someone, quietly, and I need you to make certain arrangements. January 17th, 7:14 p.m. Victoria pulled up to the house on Maple Street via the back alley, avoiding main roads where attention might follow. She'd told herself this was simple courtesy, proper thanks, perhaps an invitation to dinner somewhere nice as gesture of gratitude. The truth was more complicated. She couldn't stop thinking about that kitchen, the uncomplicated warmth of Lily's questions, the way Ethan had treated her like a person rather than a portfolio. He answered the door still in work clothes from his shift. He'd been moved to day facilities management, small promotion that came with questions he deflected about his absence during the storm. Victoria, I didn't expect... The words came out more blunt than she'd intended, stripped of the diplomatic phrasing she'd been rehearsing. My father wants to see you. Ethan's expression shifted through recognition to resignation in seconds. He knows. Security footage. Someone pulled the parking garage logs, found the anomaly. My father asked questions. She gripped her car keys tighter. He always asks questions. And now he wants to meet me. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the estate. Does he think I did something wrong? He thinks he doesn't know you. My father doesn't like unknowns, especially in my life. Doesn't trust situations he can't control or people whose motivations he can't immediately categorize. Behind Ethan, television played something animated, Lily watching, unaware of complications gathering. What happens if I refuse? Then he makes assumptions. And my father's assumptions about unknowns are rarely generous. Victoria's voice dropped. It makes my life significantly more difficult. The silence stretched while Ethan processed implications. What do you want me to do? The question caught her unprepared. Years of people asking what the board wanted, what shareholders expected, what her father thought best. No one asked what she wanted. I want you to meet him. Tell him exactly what happened. The same way you told me. I want him to see what I saw. Someone who helped without agenda. I'm not skilled at games people like your father play. I'm going to tell the truth and not apologize for helping someone who needed it. I wouldn't want anything else. That's why I'm asking you to meet him. January 18th, 7 p.m. The Hale estate made Ethan feel profoundly out of place. Iron gates, circular driveway, Georgian architecture that spoke of old money and older power. He dropped Lily with Mrs. Chen, changed into his funeral suit, the only one he owned, and hoped it would suffice. A man in expensive clothing opened the door before Ethan could knock. Mr. Brooks, this way. They passed through rooms that could have housed his entire living situation. Library with leather volumes, sitting room with furniture that belonged in museums, dining space for 20. Finally, the study. Richard Hale stood by windows overlooking grounds turned silver under landscape lighting. 71, but appearing younger, the kind of man who'd spent his entire life making decisions that affected thousands of livelihoods without losing sleep over individual consequences. "Mr. Brooks, sit." Ethan took the leather chair facing the desk, kept his spine straight, hands still. Nervousness invited interpretation as guilt. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to meet the man who brought my daughter home during the blizzard. I did what anyone should have done. But most wouldn't have. Most would have called security, documented everything, protected themselves from liability. You chose differently. Why? She needed help. The weather was dangerous. It was the right thing to do." Richard settled into his chair with movement suggesting this was evaluation, not conversation. "Tell me everything, from the moment you found her. Leave nothing out." So Ethan did, finding Victoria on the floor, her fever, her fear when he suggested calling for help, the drive through the storm, Mrs. Chen's assistance, to breakfast the next morning, the drive back, Victoria's insistence that he accept nothing in return. Through it all, Richard's expression revealed nothing. He listened with the focus of someone trained to detect lies within truth, to identify hidden agendas beneath stated motivations. When Ethan finished, silence filled the study except for fire crackling and snow-tapping windows. "What do you want from this situation?" "Nothing. I want nothing." "Everyone wants something, Mr. Brooks. Money, career advancement, access to power, status through association with my family. What is it for you?" "I want to keep doing my job and raising my daughter without complications. That's all." Richard's eyes narrowed fractionally. "You took a billionaire to your home while she was incapacitated. You must understand how that appears to people in my position. How vulnerable that made her." "I understand how it appears. I also understand your daughter was sick and frightened and alone on a hallway floor during life-threatening weather. In that moment, appearances mattered less than doing what was right. You're either remarkably principled or remarkably naive. Possibly both. Do you comprehend what I could do to your employment, your daughter's school, your life?" "Yes." Ethan met Richard's gaze without flinching. "But that doesn't change what happened. Doesn't change that I'd make the same choice again." The silence that followed felt like judgment being weighed. Then Richard stood, walked to the window. "You may go, Mr. Brooks." At the door, Ethan paused when Richard spoke again. "My daughter speaks highly of you." "That's rare." A beat. "Don't make me regret allowing this connection to continue." Not a threat. A boundary. The ground beneath Ethan's feet had just become significantly less stable. The changes started small enough to dismiss his coincidence. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Rent increase. $285 monthly, effective March 1st. Market adjustment, the landlord claimed. Legal, but the timing felt precise. Ethan did the math at his kitchen table while Lily slept upstairs. $285 represented 10% of his monthly take-home. He'd have to cut groceries to basics, defer the car maintenance he'd been planning, eliminate any buffer for emergencies. But it was manageable. He called Victoria, voice steady. "It might be nothing, but my rent just increased significantly. I'll look into it. I'll make him stop this." "Don't." "Not yet. Mom, if your father is testing me, I need to understand the full scope before asking for intervention. You're asking me to watch him pressure you. I'm asking you to trust that I can absorb pressure without breaking." Week 3 brought the school investigation. Principal Rodriguez looked uncomfortable during the meeting, Mrs. Chen beside Ethan, radiating protective fury. We received an anonymous report expressing concerns about family stability, irregular work hours, childcare arrangements, exposure to... Mrs. Chen cut through the diplomatic language. Lily is one of the best cared for children in this school. This is harassment. The principal sighed. I know. Her grades are excellent. She's well adjusted, clearly loved. But I'm required to document this. Who filed the report? Anonymous. I can't disclose. After the meeting, Mrs. Chen's anger hadn't diminished. This is that Hale man. Likely. What will you do? Nothing yet. He's watching how I respond to pressure. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Week 4 brought the car sabotage. Ethan's Honda wouldn't start after his shift. Tony, the mechanic he'd known for 5 years, delivered the verdict with visible concern. Brake lines were cut. This wasn't wear and tear, Ethan. Someone did this deliberately. How much to repair? $847, but you should file a police report. This is criminal. No police, just fix it, please. You in trouble? Nothing I can't handle. Can you do a payment plan? For you? $150 down, $100 monthly. Ethan handed over money he'd been saving for Lily's birthday, 3 months away. To week 6 brought the photograph. The business gossip site published at 6:47 a.m. on February 28th. Photo of Victoria and Ethan in a parking lot during light snowfall. He'd been steadying her on ice, hand on her arm, entirely innocent. The caption, manufactured scandal. Hale Group, CEO's secret romance, mystery man identified as building maintenance worker. By afternoon, major business sites had picked it up. By evening, trending across social media. By morning, photographers camped outside his house. Lily pressed against the window, frightened. Daddy, why are those people taking our pictures? They're confused about something. It'll pass, baby girl. But it didn't. Journalists excavated his background. Dead wife, financial struggles, working class employment. Headlines framed him as either opportunist or working class hero. Neither true, both damaging. His supervisor called that afternoon. Ethan, we're placing you on administrative leave. Paid for now. Until this resolves, it's better if you're not in the building. Translation: You're an embarrassment. Victoria appeared that evening through the back alley, hair escaping professional styling, eyes carrying weeks of accumulated frustration. This is my father's doing. The pressure, the investigation, all of it. I'm ending this. I'm going to tell him, no. He's trying to destroy your life. He's creating pressure, watching how I respond. If I break, I'm not strong enough. If I hold, maybe I earn respect. That's how men like your father operate. I don't care about his respect. I care about you being harassed. Ethan's voice stayed level despite anger burning beneath. I'm asking you to trust that I can handle this. But Victoria, if Lily is endangered, I'm ending this regardless of tests or respect. Her safety isn't negotiable. Agreed. After she left, Ethan sat in darkness, thinking about what he'd gotten into. This wasn't fiction where class differences dissolved through good intentions. This was real life, where power had teeth and wealthy men's games could destroy ordinary people's lives. But he'd survived worse. Sarah's death, medical debt that nearly bankrupted him, 3 years of night shifts while raising a daughter alone. He'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding pressure. It was about deciding what principles you wouldn't compromise regardless of cost. And he wouldn't compromise on this. Victoria deserved to choose her own connections without her father's interference. That was worth fighting for, even if the fight was simply refusing to break under orchestrated pressure. What Ethan didn't know was that 72 hours away, Richard Hale would make a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, the board would convene, expecting to demand Victoria's compliance. But Richard had spent 6 weeks testing the wrong thing, and he'd finally understood what the right question should have been all along. The night before the board meeting, Richard sat alone in his study at 11:34 p.m., February 28th, dissolving into March 1st. The background check on Ethan Brooks lay open across his desk, 47 pages documenting 3 years of exemplary employment, neighbor testimonials, teacher recommendations for Lily. 6 weeks of investigation searching for the flaw that would justify his concerns. The flaw didn't exist. Every test Richard had engineered, every pressure applied, rent increase, school investigation, the car incident he discovered and quietly terminated the executive responsible for, all of it had revealed the same truth. Ethan Brooks absorbed adversity without complaint, without leveraging his connection to Victoria, without compromising the principles he was teaching his daughter. The man refused to break. Richard's gaze drifted to the photograph on the bookshelf behind him. Margaret, frozen at 37, 3 years before cancer. Victoria at 6, missing her front teeth, laughing in her mother's arms. The garden where that photo was taken no longer existed. Richard had paved it over for additional security fencing the year after Margaret died. When she died, the world had offered him a choice. Scale back and focus on raising Victoria, or build something so massive that his daughter would never face vulnerability again. He'd chosen empire, chosen protocols and security systems and layers of protection that turned genuine connection into liability assessment, chosen walls high enough to keep out every threat except loneliness. And 6 weeks ago, every single protection had failed. His daughter had collapsed on a hallway floor, and all his carefully constructed systems had noticed nothing. The person who'd helped operated completely outside Richard's framework. No agenda, no stake in Hale Group's success, no transactional motive Richard could identify or leverage. Ethan had helped because someone needed help. A concept so simple Richard had nearly forgotten it existed. The realization settled into his chest like cold water, that he'd been testing the wrong thing for 6 weeks. The question wasn't whether Ethan could be trusted around Victoria. The question was whether Richard himself had become the kind of father his daughter couldn't turn to in crisis. My father can't know. Victoria's words from the security footage, spoken through fever. Not because he was dangerous, but because his love had calcified into control so complete it felt like threat. Richard picked up his phone, found Patricia Chen's contact. Patricia, cancel tomorrow's emergency meeting agenda. Confusion filtered through the line. Cancel? We have 16 members prepared to demand Victoria distance herself from... Tell them the meeting will proceed, but the agenda is mine now, not theirs. He ended the call before she could probe further. The fire had burned to embers, shadows claiming most of the room. In the darkness, Richard could almost see Margaret's expression, the one she'd worn when he'd missed Victoria's school performances, when empire building had consumed time meant for family, when protection had become indistinguishable from imprisonment. I chose you, he whispered to the photograph, words meant for both the wife who died and the daughter who'd learned to stop asking for his presence. I thought I knew what that meant. Tomorrow, he would show the board what leadership actually required. Not control, not protection. Something closer to what Ethan Brooks had demonstrated, the courage to do right even when it cost everything. Morning arrived with media vans parked outside Hale Group headquarters, photographers jostling for position as executives entered. On the boardroom at 9 a.m. carried execution day tension, 16 faces arranged around glass while Victoria presented quarterly numbers that should have generated celebration. Marcus Whitfield interrupted before she could finish. "We're avoiding the issue everyone's thinking about. Your connection to that building worker has created measurable shareholder concern. 2.1% stock decline." Victoria's hands stilled on the presentation remote. Are clients questioning our execution, Marcus, or consuming tabloid gossip? Patricia adjusted her glasses, choosing diplomatic language. When a CEO's private affairs create market impact, fiduciary duty requires intervention. Richard let the silence stretch, watching Marcus lean forward with confidence born from perceived alliance. Let them think they controlled this narrative. Let them prepare demands for sabbaticals and public distancing. Then he stood. "Victoria, I need the room. Wait outside." After she left, Richard buttoned his suit jacket with deliberate precision, the gesture carrying 7 decades of authority. "Before this board makes demands, you need context about Ethan Brooks. Information I should have provided 6 weeks ago." He walked to the windows overlooking Chicago's skyline, the city he'd helped shape through decades of calculated decisions. "When my daughter collapsed in this building during a blizzard, our security protocols failed to notice. Our emergency systems didn't activate. Our carefully constructed protections did nothing." He turned back to face them. A night janitor found her unconscious and made a choice. He could have called security, documented everything, protected himself from the exact liability you're all concerned about. Instead, he took her to his home and asked for nothing in return. Patricia's expression tightened. "Richard, we understand gratitude, but I spent 6 weeks testing him, increased his rent, had his parenting investigated, applied pressure designed to expose ulterior motives." Richard's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Every test revealed the same thing. Ethan Brooks operates with integrity we've systematically engineered our world to dismiss as weakness." Marcus found his voice, defensive instinct surfacing. "What are you suggesting? That we—" "I'm suggesting that any board member unable to distinguish between personal life and business liability should submit resignation by end of day." The words landed with finality. "My daughter has my complete support in all aspects of her life. Anyone speaking disrespectfully about Ethan Brooks or his daughter answers to me personally." Silence descended, broken only by ventilation systems humming. Furthermore, effective immediately, Hale Group launches an employee advocacy initiative. Living wages, $22 hourly minimum, childcare subsidies, emergency assistance funds, health coverage that doesn't bankrupt families facing medical crisis. Richard returned to his seat. "Ethan Brooks will serve on the advisory board at $68,000 annually. His perspective matters more than quarterly projections." Marcus had gone pale. The shareholders will appreciate investment in the workforce, keeping this company functional." Meeting adjourned. 16 executives filed out in stunned silence. Victoria remained in the corridor, her expression unreadable. Richard gestured toward his office, smaller than hers but holding photographs spanning 4 decades. Inside, he moved to the window, the same view he'd studied for most of his professional life. "When your mother died, everyone told me to sell the company. Said I couldn't run it and raise you properly." Victoria waited, sensing something fundamental breaking open between them. "I chose you. Thought that meant building something you could inherit, creating protections so you'd never be vulnerable. He paused. But on that hallway floor, all my protections failed. The person who helped had no agenda. Just basic decency we've somehow decided is weakness. You tested him for 6 weeks. Applied every pressure I could justify. Watched him absorb it without breaking, without leveraging his connection to you, without compromising the principles he's teaching his daughter. Richard's voice roughened. I wanted to find disqualification, wanted proof he was a threat. And I was wrong. About him. About what strength looks like. He turned to face her. You trusted a stranger more than you trusted me. When you needed help, you specifically said I couldn't know. I've built walls so high you chose to collapse on marble rather than call your own father. Victoria crossed the distance, wrapped her arms around him with desperation of someone reclaiming something long lost. Richard stood frozen, then returned the embrace. The board approved the quarterly strategy, and I meant what I said. Employee Advocacy Initiative, Ethan on advisory board. He'll resist. Call it charity. Victoria pulled back, tears tracking through makeup. Then I'll convince him it's earned. Because the night he helped your daughter matters more than any earnings report. Invite him to Sunday dinner. It's time I properly met the man who taught my daughter what my protections couldn't. That sometimes the safest place is built on trust instead of walls. 3 months later, early June warmth had erased winter's damage. Tulips bloomed in neat rows along the front walk of the house on Maple Street. Red petals bright against blue siding exactly as the seed packets had promised. Victoria sat on the porch steps, expensive shoes discarded, watching Lily dig enthusiastically while Ethan guided her hands with patient instruction. The 7-year-old's gap-toothed grin was visible even through dirt smudges. Miss Victoria, after these grow tall, can we plant sunflowers next? You said they get taller than people. Sunflowers sound perfect. We'll plant them right where the sun hits longest. Mrs. Chen emerged carrying lemonade and glasses, her expression carrying satisfied wisdom of someone who'd predicted this outcome. You're all going to burn out here without sunscreen. As Ethan headed inside, Mrs. Chen settled beside Victoria on the steps, their unlikely friendship built on shared understanding. When he brought you here that night, I thought it would create problems. You were right to worry, but wrong about the outcome. The older woman smiled. Do you make them happy? They make you happy. That matters more than boardrooms or bank accounts. Inside, Ethan grabbed the sunscreen from the kitchen counter. Through the window, he could see his daughter laughing in the garden, Victoria comfortable on steps that had witnessed 3 years of single parenthood and somehow made space for something new. His phone buzzed. Text from Richard Hale, the 3rd Sunday dinner invitation this month. Family dinner next week. Bring Lily. Victoria says no excuses this time. 6 months ago, the concept would have been absurd. Now it felt natural. A billionaire patriarch learning to build bridges instead of walls, discovering that the best protection he could offer his daughter was freedom to choose her own connections. The Employee Advocacy Initiative had helped 73 families in 3 months. Living wages implemented across departments. Childcare subsidies meaning single parents could accept better opportunities. Emergency loans preventing the desperate choices Ethan remembered from Sarah's final hospital bills. Ethan pocketed the phone and headed outside. Victoria looked up as he approached, shielding her eyes against afternoon sun, and smiled. The same expression photographers had captured and tabloids had dissected, but now it meant something simpler. Lily's voice cut through the warmth, bright with the next impossible idea. Daddy, can we plant a whole rainbow of flowers? Miss Victoria can help pick the colors. Victoria met Ethan's eyes over Lily's head, something passing between them that needed no words. Permission, partnership, the particular joy that comes from building something together, in one planted seed at a time. A rainbow garden sounds perfect, baby girl. The tulips had bloomed exactly as promised, red petals visible from the street where Mrs. Chen kept watch, and storms sometimes raged, but never quite managed to break what mattered most. And in 2 weeks, they'd plant sunflowers that would grow taller than all of them, reaching toward light the same way people reached toward connection when given the chance. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe choice. Sometimes it was simply the human choice, to help when someone needed helping, to trust when trust was offered, to believe that decency mattered more than the careful calculations turning people into transactions. And if you were extraordinarily lucky, that choice led somewhere unexpected, somewhere that felt like home. Even standing in dirt and sunlight with a 7-year-old who believed gardens could grow anything if you watered them enough.